Today we're out here taking a look at the 2016 Lexus IS 200T. As the name implies, this is the latest Lexus to receive their brand new 2-liter turbocharged engine. Now, in a nutshell, the big difference for 2016 is that we get two new engines under the hood, and that old 2.5-liter 6-cylinder engine is now gone. As you can tell from this enormous grille up front, this particular trim is the IS 200T F Sport. The F Sport is the looks faster, handles slightly better package. Although the IS has grown over time, and this is the longest IS they have ever built, it is still relatively small in this segment, with just the S60 and entries like the Mercedes-Benz CLA being a little bit shorter. Even though we have a small 4-cylinder turbo engine under the hood, we still have dual exhaust tips in the back, and of course we have a new badge back here that says IS 200T. Under the hood is where we find the biggest change for 2016. We no longer have that extremely smooth 2.5-liter V6 engine. That old engine produced 204 horsepower. Instead, we get this 2-liter turbocharged engine that we first saw in the Lexus NX. This engine produces 241 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. Now, by the numbers, that is fairly competitive in this segment. Interestingly enough, we also find a new V6 engine under this hood in a new mid-level trim, the IS 300 all-wheel drive. This 2-liter turbocharged engine is available only in rear-wheel drive. The next step up is that 300 all-wheel drive. Fuel economy for the IS 200T is the highest in the IS lineup at 22 miles per gallon city, 33 highway, and 26 combined. The new 300 all-wheel drive drops that down to 19, 26, 21. Obviously, with the new turbocharged engine under the hood, the base model's performance figures do change a little bit. The old IS 250 went from 0 to 60 in just over 7 seconds. This will now do it in 6.8. The IS 300 all-wheel drive will do it in 6.1, and the 350 will do it in 5.6. On the inside, Lexus did not make any significant changes to the seats or to the dashboard or infotainment systems. In a nutshell, these seats are quite comfortable, but they're not quite as adjustable as some of the competition. We only have a 2-way adjustable lumbar support, not a 4-way variety that we do find in some of the competition, and BMW's and Volvo's seats are a little bit more comfortable. Likewise, the rear seats are exactly the same as the last IS we took a look at. That means these are a little bit more compact than some of the other luxury options out there. I still, however, have enough room for my head and enough legroom to sit comfortably behind myself. For 2016, Lexus didn't make any major changes to the interior, so we still have height adjustable seatbelts there. We still start out with Softex imitation leather seating. Our particular model has the optional sport seats with heating and ventilation. The door panel design is basically as you'd expect, as is the dashboard design. You can see that we have the same basic look that we've seen for a few years right over here, with this somewhat small infotainment screen in the center. These semi-touch screen controls for the dual zone climate controls. This is a touch slider right over here for the temperature. We also have physical buttons for some of the other controls, single slot optical disc player. We have the controls for the heated and ventilated seats down there, a very traditional console shifter, and of course this somewhat awkward infotainment controller. There aren't too many cars in this segment that offer an LCD instrument cluster. This is one of them and has that physical ring that slides side to side when you press a button out here on the steering wheel. Although this display is not as configurable as Cadillac CUE, it's just about as configurable as the Volvo system, and the ATS doesn't get the latest CUE LCD instrument cluster. Since we are in the F Sport trim, we do get this 3-spoke F Sport steering wheel with control buttons on the front and paddle shifters on the back. Out on the road, the difference between the IS 200T and IS 250 is instantly recognizable. Of course, we do get the Lexus 8-speed automatic transmission, which is a little bit quicker shifting than their old 6-speed, but this is not as fast as ZF's 8-speed that we find in the Audi and in the BMW. In terms of actual raw performance numbers, the IS 200T is actually only 0.2 of a second faster to 60 than the old IS 250. The acceleration number is important to keep in mind because going from 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds actually makes this one of the slower compact luxury car entries in the United States. Really, only the ATS 2.5 with a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine in their very base model will go from 0 to 60 slower than this. The Audi A4i is actually about the same speed as this, even though BMW says it's a little bit slower. BMW tends to like to underrate their engine designs, and that's likely why the 328i is so much faster than the IS 200T, even though the actual power figures are relatively similar. The IS 200T still handles just like the other Lexus IS models, and that is to say one of the best in this segment. That frequently surprises some people who usually assume that the BMW 3 Series would be the best handling entry. That's not actually true anymore. The ATS and the IS actually tie for the top spot in this particular segment. It's all down to the excellent suspension design, excellent weight balance, and just overall priorities that Lexus had when designing the IS. Now, many people accuse the IS of not having quite as much soul as they would like, but to be perfectly honest, the BMW 3 Series is lacking an awful lot of soul these days, and the IS actually has a little bit more than you might expect. Both road holding and braking in this F-Sport package receive top marks in this particular segment, along with the ATS 2.0T. Now, that is important to keep in mind because the ATS does have that low-end 2.5 model. The 2.0T is probably the sportiest version of the ATS in my book. I think it actually has a better balance than the ATS 3.6, and it's the better cross-shop to this Lexus IS or the IS 300. Of course, what the F-Sport package adds in terms of handling, it takes away when it comes to the ride. Very much like BMW's M Sport, this particular suspension package is just a little bit too firm for my tastes as far as a daily driver would go, but if you're looking for something sporty, this is definitely something you should look at. A quiet cabin has long been a Lexus hallmark, and that continues in the IS 200T, although when you rev this engine up, you do get an awful lot more engine noise than in the IS 250, and that engine noise is 4-cylinder engine noise, so it's not going to sound quite as nice. Fuel economy has been a hair disappointing in the 200T. We have been averaging 24.9 miles per gallon, which is a little bit lower than the EPA says you're going to get in this model. In contrast, the last IS 250 that we reviewed got 27.5 miles per gallon, which was actually a little bit better than we had expected. That means that the BMW 320i, certain versions of the A4, the S60, and even the Infiniti Q50 will actually score better in terms of overall average than this IS 200T. Now, the 200T is more drivable than the old IS 250, it's just not more efficient or more refined. On the flip side, however, the large sales figures we see in the competition with their small turbocharged engines really does seem to show that the average shopper in this particular segment isn't as concerned with engine refinement as they are with engine power. And that's definitely what's going on in this 200T now. They've traded that engine refinement from the IS 250 for the extra power that we get in the 200T. As we've come to expect from Lexus, there is a premium to be paid for the Lexus reliability reputation. This starts at $37,325 for the IS 200T. And that's even though this performs only a little bit better than the BMW 320i, priced at $33,150. Now, we do have more standard feature content inside this vehicle than we do in the 320i at that price. However, this is still going to be a little bit more expensive than a comparable BMW. In addition, the Cadillac ATS 2.5 with their naturally aspirated 2.5-liter engine is just about as fast as this 0 to 60, but it's going to cost you less at $33,215. In my book, the two most direct competitors to this vehicle are the BMW 320i, the BMW 328i, and the Cadillac ATS in 2.5 and 2.0T trims. Because all three of those vehicles have a solid rear-wheel drive dynamic, and they're all trying to be the sportier entries in this segment. In the latest generation, the BMW 3 Series has become larger, softer, and much more comfortable than it was in the past. That means that the handling award actually goes to the Lexus IS, tying with the Cadillac ATS. The Cadillac ATS is a little bit more engaging than this particular vehicle. However, the base power plant in this, I think, is a little bit more pleasing than that naturally aspirated 4-cylinder in the Caddy. Now, you should know that the Cadillac ATS with the 2-liter turbocharged engine is going to be just as nimble as this IS 200T. However, it's going to be considerably faster. It makes an awful lot more power than this particular engine. You can also get it with all-wheel drive, and Cadillac will do an 8-speed automatic with the all-wheel drive in that ATS. BMW and Mercedes especially seem to like to underrate their engines, so the 328i and the C300 likely produce more power than the manufacturers claim. Lexus, however, is much more conservative, so based on the numbers, this engine is actually producing about 241 horsepower. That, combined with the relatively more gentle transmission programming, is the reason that the IS 200T is slower to 60 than we see in the competition, even though the advertised horsepower figures are approximately the same. In terms of performance, the IS 350, which would be the top-end Lexus IS, lives in an area sort of between the BMW with the 2-liter turbo and their 3-liter turbo engine. Lexus has proven themselves over the years to be a very conservative luxury car manufacturer. Even though the looks on the outside of the IS are much more expressive than we've expected out of Lexus in the past, what's under the hood and what's in the cabin are still clinging to that very conservative design philosophy. Toyota does not like to change things radically from one generation to the other, or even from one model year to the other, like we're seeing right here in the IS 200T. That's why we're not seeing all-wheel drive with this 8-speed automatic in the Lexus IS at this moment, although we might see it in the future. That means that for me, the IS 200T ends up sort of in the middle of the pack. It really depends on how much you value the very well-deserved reliability and low ownership cost reputation that Lexus has built for themselves. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. Be sure and click that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen and check out the full review on thetruthaboutcars.com. I'll see you next week.